Hey, what's up, guys? Back with a video. It's been a little while since I made a video. I was out for a couple weeks, but I'm back and gonna start making videos again. So thank you for those of you that subscribed. I don't have a lot so far, but I do enjoy doing this. It is pretty fun. I don't make YouTube regularly. It's something that I kind of do in my free time. So I do appreciate the support that I get, and I'm looking forward to continuing to provide more content as well. So let me know what you're interested in seeing, and I'll start making it. So what I wanted to do today is focus on the NBA because I picked a good day to come back sports-wise because there was a lot that happened in the NBA today, trade deadline. So I'm going to talk about the biggest trades, in my opinion, that are going to be most influential to the playoffs, most influential to the teams involved, how I view them. I'm going to give trade grades to the teams that made trades, and I'm also going to give the biggest winner and the biggest loser of the trade deadline. So stay tuned for that. So the first trade that I want to talk about, I'm going to try to talk about these in terms of how big they were, because it's debatable, what exactly was the biggest move that made, because some of these players, they've been good, but it's a little difficult to gauge how good they are necessarily compared to other players and whether or not they're superstars, etc. But in terms of recent All-Star appearances, I'm going to start with the Nikola Vucevic trade. He was traded with his teammate Elfro Camino to Chicago, and the Bulls sent Wendell Carter, Otto Porter Jr., and 2 first-round picks to the Orlando Magic. So I actually like this trade for both sides. I think that Vucevic going to Chicago, I gave that an A-. So Chicago's in a weird situation because they've been very mediocre for years. They kind of been playing around with different talent that they get in the draft that I think is generally overhyped and doesn't necessarily perform to expectations. An example of that is Wendell Carter, who they shipped off to Orlando. And in getting Vucevic, you're getting a proven guy who is incredibly underrated on an Orlando Magic team that does not have a lot of offense. And now you're pairing him with Zach LaVine, who is a guy who is also an incredible offensive player who kind of flies under the radar. You have a very good two-way tandem there that almost kind of resembles Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray to a degree. But the thing with this team is that they really need to find some kind of defensive presence. But in a city like Chicago, I give this trade an A- because, or I give it in the A range because you're going to need to, this team is going to have its best opportunity to be successful through free agency. It's a big city, historic franchise. If they get a good defensive player in upcoming free agencies or in trades, this could be a huge win for them. But I give it an A- because they're giving up 2 first-round picks, which I don't necessarily think that they're going to be lottery picks, but I think that, the East is, I could see a situation where they may not make the playoffs next year depending on how some of their young players develop. Orlando, I'm going to give this trade a B+. I think they needed to get rid of Vucevic. He was kind of in a position where he's a good player, but he's not really giving you much value when your team is now in the bottom 5 in the league, record-wise. But really, I'm not really sure if this is the best offer you could have gotten for him, because Otto Porter Jr., you pretty much already kind of know what he is. He's not necessarily a standout player. Wendell Carter is really going to be the centerpiece of the success of this trade or not for the Magic. If he can tap into that potential, and now that he's essentially going into a situation where he could take charge, he could be the go-to guy on this team. If he takes advantage of that, this could be a win for them. But I could see a situation where he doesn't pan out, and essentially you're banking on those first-round picks for Chicago getting into the lottery in order to have success from this trade. So next trade I want to talk about, and this trade was just amazing, just baffling to me, like how it even happened. But it's Victor Oladipo going to the Miami Heat, and the Miami Heat, and this was right at the last minute of the deadline too, and the Heat gave Houston Kelly Olynyk, Avery Bradley, and a pick swap. So I made a video about this when Houston made the Harden trade, that they have botched trades continually year after year, and this is yet another example of just a horrific trade for the Rockets. Just from the sense of, and this is something that I talked about as well, so you had an opportunity when you traded Harden to keep Karis LeVert, who has shown that he has been very productive in a situation where he is the guy, your go-to offense. But he didn't fit the timeline in Brooklyn, so that's why they shipped him, because you want to go with Harden when you're in win now mode. So, instead of taking LeVert, they trade for Oladipo because they wanted to tap into what Oladipo can do and see if he could bring back his form from quad injury. But obviously the team has been struggling. And I think that when it became apparent in the news that Oladipo was going to pursue the market in the off season next season, what his free agency values look like, Houston felt like they had no chance to keep him, and they probably didn't get any offers, so they were just willing to dump him for anything. But you think about, you could have had Karis LeVert, but then you now have Kelly Olynyk and Avery Bradley. That's a massive L for the front office. They are just, I don't know what's going on there. They're gonna need Cade Cunningham in order to hope that they can save this team. But Miami gets an A+. They've made a lot of really good moves. They were these guys would have been the winner of this trade deadline, but they're the close second. I'm going to give it to another team I'm going to talk about shortly. But this is just an absolute heist to get Victor Oladipo for that. And they also got another good trade earlier in the day, getting Bielitsa from the Kings. He provides them some floor spacing. So they're essentially flipping Kelly Olynyk and Avery Bradley for Victor Oladipo and Nemanja Bielitsa. That's incredible. Pat Riley, genius for pulling this off. So three other trades I want to talk about real quick. I really like the J.J. Redick trade to the Mavericks. The Mavericks really needed shooting. They needed to find some way to replace Seth Curry. But not only did they get J.J. Redick, but they also got Nikola Melli, who is a very underrated player for the Pelicans, who really played well as a stretch four alongside Zion, which is a guy I talked about in one of my other videos, that he's an underrated player for the Pelicans. And now he's going to the Mavericks, where he can kind of fall into that same role as Maxi Kleber, floor spacing big. Dallas just got more depth from this trade. They gave up James Johnson and Wes Nwundu, who I didn't think fit well on the team. I didn't know why they got them anyway, but it's a great trade for the Mavericks. I give them an A. For the Pelicans, they get a C for me, because they did get rid of J.J. Redick for something, but the amount of value that they could have gotten for him last offseason, especially considering how good of a shooter he is historically, how bad a season he's had this year, they really wasted an opportunity to trade J.J. Redick last year, and they probably could have gotten a lot more value than what they got here. So I give them a C for this. But at least they did try to get what they could for him. A trade that I didn't like personally was the Portland Trailblazers trading for Norman Powell and trading Gary Trent and Rodney Hood to the Toronto Raptors. So Norman Powell is good. I know he's had some great games, but to be honest, I'm not really sure how much better he is than Gary Trent. And Gary Trent, I liked watching him play when C.J. McCollum was out. He's one of those guys that Portland does a very good job at doing, is getting a underrated two guard who could play next to Dame and really provide a lot of shot making and some scrappy defense as well. Gary Trent really has improved a lot the last few seasons. And not only that, but you're giving up Rodney Hood. So I don't know if I would rather have Norman Powell than the additional depth at your two-guard position and your wings. So to me, like, I don't really understand this trade from Portland's perspective. I think Toronto, you know, a team that maybe they're not going to make the playoffs next year, they're focusing on their future. This is a really good trade for them. Gary Trent could be a guy who steps in well to what Norman Powell was able to do. I do get Powell as a better creator and a better defender, but I just didn't understand this trade personally. And then Rajon Rondo going to the Clippers. I like that trade a lot. I think that the Clippers really needed a point guard. I just wish they didn't give up Lou Williams, though, to the Hawks, who the Hawks got. So I gave the Clippers an A- for that, because Lou Williams is still a good spark plug off the bench who could be useful in the postseason. But his defense and his play this year has been so bad, I think it is an upgrade to get Rondo. Hawks, I don't understand why you didn't get a young player for Rondo, or really why you signed Rondo in the first place. So I give them a B-. The biggest winner in this trade deadline for me was the Denver Nuggets. And I'm a little biased because I'm a Nuggets fan. I used to live in Denver for a little bit. But getting Aaron Gordon on this team for only Gary Harris and RJ Hampton and a first-round pick, which is going to be in the 20s for them, is great value. They really needed a defensive big who was going to guard somebody like LeBron James after Jeremy Grant left. And Aaron Gordon is a great defender. He also is a better offensive player than he's given credit for because he hasn't had the opportunity. And now they're getting him in addition to JaVale McGee, who they also trade for to provide rim protection. I think Denver is going to, they've improved their roster to the point where they might even be a little better than they were last year. So are they going to go back to the Western Conference Finals again? I'm not sure, but they're going to be a contender that I think we need to keep an eye on depending on how LeBron's injury is. And then my biggest loser, the Boston Celtics. So your trade exception, you guys needed a big, and you use it on Evan Fournier, who is he's a good player, I give it that, but how is he going to be a game-changing player to help your team? This team is littered with guards, especially young guards, and you're adding a guy who is a good shooter but really doesn't provide your biggest need, which was having a defensive presence in the paint. I don't understand what Danny Ainge is doing. And then the Tice trade for 2 backup bigs was also very suspect. Celtics really took a bad loss with this trade, and yet another example of wasted opportunity that they've had. If you're interested in seeing my explanation of that, go to one of my previous videos. I talk about the Celtics there. But that's all I got for this video on the trade deadline today. Let me know what you think of this video, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.